"Hey, Daddy, it's my sister," twins said to their millionaire father when they saw a girl identical to them sleeping on the street. Before we dive into this incredible story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. You're about to witness a journey that will remind you that family isn't always what we expect. Enjoy the story. The Arizona sun blazed mercilessly as Richard Sterling loosened his silk tie, stepping out of his black Mercedes at the remote gas station. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning that had been running full blast during their drive to Phoenix. "Daddy, I'm thirsty," Emma complained from the back seat, her blonde curls sticking to her neck. "Me too," echoed Chloe, Emma's identical twin, fanning herself dramatically. Richard smiled at his 7-year-old daughters, the light of his life since losing his wife 2 years ago. "Just a quick stop, girls. We'll grab some cold drinks and be back on the road." As a successful CEO of Sterling Enterprises, Richard was used to luxury, but this business trip required traveling through less affluent areas. The gas station looked worn down, its paint peeling under the relentless desert heat. While Richard pumped gas, Emma and Chloe pressed their faces against the window, watching the world outside with curious eyes. Suddenly, both girls gasped in unison. "Daddy!" Emma shrieked, pointing frantically toward the station's entrance. "Daddy! Look!" Chloe joined in, her voice filled with excitement and confusion. Richard followed their gaze and froze. Near the station's entrance sat a small girl, roughly the same age as his daughters. Her clothes were dirty and worn, her dark hair tangled, but her face, his breath caught in his throat. The girl's face was absolutely identical to Emma and Chloe's. Same bright blue eyes, same delicate features, same stubborn chin that Richard recognized as his own. "Daddy," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with wonder, "is that our sister?" The little girl looked up at that moment, meeting Richard's stunned gaze through the car window. In her eyes, he saw something that made his heart race, a familiar intelligence, a spark he knew intimately from watching his own daughters. "That's impossible," Richard murmured. But even as he spoke the words, he knew he was looking at something that would change their lives forever. Richard's hands trembled as he approached the small girl sitting by the gas station entrance. Emma and Chloe had insisted on coming with him, their excitement barely contained. "Hello," Richard said gently, crouching to the girl's level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" The girl looked up with those impossibly familiar blue eyes. "Sophia," she whispered, her voice hoarse from thirst. "Are you going to make me leave? The man said I can't stay here much longer." Richard's heart broke at the resignation in her young voice. "No one's making you leave. Are you here alone?" Sophia nodded, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. "Grandmother Rose died last week. She took care of me, but now—" Her voice trailed off. Emma stepped forward boldly. "You look exactly like us. Show him, Chloe." The three girls stood side by side, and Richard felt the world tilt. They weren't just similar, they were identical. Same height, same build, same facial features. It was impossible yet undeniable. "Sophia, do you know anything about your family, your parents?" Richard asked carefully. "Grandmother Rose said my mama was an angel in heaven. She never told me about my daddy." Sophia's eyes filled with hope. Could you help me find them?" Richard made a decision that felt both crazy and completely right. "Sophia, would you like to come home with us, just until we figure things out?" 3 days later, Richard stared at the DNA results with shaking hands. Dr. Martinez, the family physician, delivered the news with professional calm. "The test is conclusive, Mr. Sterling. Sophia is genetically identical to Emma and Chloe. They're triplets." "That's impossible," Richard breathed. "My wife only delivered twins. I was there." Dr. Martinez hesitated. "I've requested the original hospital records from 7 years ago. There are irregularities. Documents appear to have been altered." Richard's blood ran cold. "Altered how?" "The original delivery notes mentioned 3 babies, but someone changed the records to show only 2. This required administrative access to the hospital's filing system." The implications hit Richard like a physical blow. Someone had deliberately separated Sophia from her sisters. Someone who had access to hospital records. Someone who knew about the birth. Someone in his own family. Richard's hands clenched around the hospital records as he sat in his home office, staring at the evidence. Someone with administrative access had deliberately hidden Sophia's existence. Only 3 people had that level of authority during the twins' birth: himself, his late wife Sarah, and Uncle Vincent, he whispered. The office door opened, and Vincent Sterling entered without knocking, a habit that had always irritated Richard. At 62, Vincent remained imposing, his silver hair perfectly styled, his expression calculating. "Richard, I heard about your charitable project," Vincent said smoothly, settling into the leather chair across from the desk. "Bringing home a street child. Very noble, but perhaps misguided." "Her name is Sophia," Richard said coldly. "And she's not a street child. She's my daughter." Vincent's eyebrow raised slightly. "Your daughter? Based on what evidence?" Richard slid the DNA results across the desk. Vincent glanced at them, his expression unchanging, but Richard caught the flicker of something, knowledge, not surprise. "Interesting," Vincent said calmly. "Though I wonder if you've considered the implications. Adding a 3rd child to your will, someone with no background verification, could complicate estate planning significantly." The words hit Richard like ice water. "Estate planning? She's 7 years old, Vincent." "I'm simply thinking ahead, as I always have for this family," Vincent replied. "I had to make many difficult decisions when Sarah went into premature labor. The medical complications were severe." Richard leaned forward. "What decisions?" "Life or death choices, Richard. You were in shock, unable to function. Someone had to ensure the family's interests were protected." "Protected from what?" Vincent's mask slipped slightly, revealing cold calculation beneath. "From complications that could have destroyed everything your father built. Sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good." Richard's blood turned to ice as understanding dawned. "You knew about Sophia. You've always known." Vincent stood smoothly. "I suggest you consider carefully, Richard. That girl's sudden appearance could destabilize everything. Your other daughters. Security, the company's stability, our family's reputation. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again." As Vincent left, Richard stared at the DNA results with new eyes. His uncle hadn't just known about Sophia. He'd been the one to hide her. The question was why. Sophia stood frozen in the marble foyer of the Sterling mansion, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit. The chandelier above sparkled like captured stars, and the silence felt suffocating after years of street noise. "This is your room," Emma announced proudly, leading Sophia up the grand staircase. The bedroom was larger than any place Sophia had ever lived, decorated in soft pastels with a canopy bed that looked like something from a fairy tale. "It's beautiful," Sophia whispered, but her voice carried uncertainty rather than joy. That first week became a battlefield of adjustment. Sophia refused to sleep in the canopy bed, instead curling up on the floor with her rabbit. She hoarded food in her pockets, unable to trust that meals would always be available. "Why won't she eat with us?" Chloe asked Margaret, the family housekeeper, after Sophia again took her dinner to her room. Margaret sighed. "Change is hard, sweetheart. She's learning to trust that she's safe here." Emma and Chloe alternated between fascination and frustration. One moment they'd be braiding each other's hair, marveling at their identical features. The next, they'd argue when Sophia couldn't understand their games or flinched away from sudden movements. "She's weird," Chloe complained after Sophia refused to play with the expensive dollhouse. "She doesn't know how to do anything fun." "She knows how to survive," Richard said quietly, watching Sophia through the window as she sat alone in the garden. "That's something you girls have never had to learn." The private school posed another challenge. Principal Morrison frowned at Sophia's incomplete documentation. "Mr. Sterling, without proper records, immunization certificates, previous school transcripts. She's been living on the streets, Richard said firmly. She had no formal education, but she's brilliant. Give her a chance. Dr. Sarah Hamilton, the child psychologist Richard had hired, observed Sophia carefully during their sessions. She's hypervigilant, Sarah explained, constantly scanning for threats. This is normal for a child who's experienced trauma. That night, Sophia's screams woke the entire household. Richard found her huddled in the corner, sobbing about the bad man in the suit, who used to watch her and grandmother Rose. He came when Rose got sick, Sophia whispered. Rose said he was dangerous, that we had to hide. Richard's blood chilled. Can you describe him? Tall, silver hair, scary eyes. He asked questions about me. As Richard comforted his terrified daughter, Vincent's words echoed in his mind. Some doors once opened can never be closed again. Vincent had been watching Sophia long before Richard found her. The next morning brought Richard's first real glimpse into the children's traumatized world. He found Madison in the kitchen at dawn, stuffing bread rolls into her pockets with practiced stealth. Madison, what are you doing? Richard asked gently. She froze like a deer caught in headlights. Sorry, I'll put them back. Please don't punish Tyler because of me. I'm not angry, Richard assured her, kneeling to her level. But why are you hiding food? In case Derek finds us, Madison whispered. Sometimes he'd lock us up for days. Tyler gets sick when he's hungry. Richard's heart broke a little more. There's always food here, Madison. You never have to hide it again. But old habits died hard. Throughout the day, Richard watched Madison exhibit hyper-vigilant behaviors, checking windows, memorizing exits, positioning herself between Tyler and any potential threat. She refused to let Tyler out of her sight, even hovering outside the bathroom door when he needed privacy. Tyler, meanwhile, jumped at sudden noises and apologized constantly for normal childhood behaviors like spilling juice or laughing too loudly. That evening at dinner, their first formal meal together, Tyler asked an innocent question that hit Richard like a punch to the gut. Mr. Richard, why are you being nice to us? What do you want us to do for you? The question revealed everything about what these children had learned to expect from adults. Love always came with a price. Kindness always demanded payment. I don't want anything from you, Tyler, Richard replied carefully. Sometimes people help each other just because it's the right thing to do. Tyler frowned, processing this foreign concept. But Derek always said we had to earn our keep, that nobody helps anybody for free. Derek was wrong about a lot of things, Richard said firmly. That night, Richard heard soft crying from the hallway. He found Madison huddled in the bathroom, clutching a crumpled photograph with tears streaming down her face. The photo showed a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, clearly Madison's mother. The edges were worn from being folded and unfolded countless times. This is all I have left of her, Madison sobbed. Derek said if I wasn't good, he'd throw it away. I was so scared of losing it that I hid it in my shoe. Richard sat beside her, on the cold bathroom floor. She looks like she was a wonderful mother. She was, Madison whispered. She used to sing to us every night. She made Tyler laugh when he had bad dreams. She never hit us, never yelled. She just loved us. She'd be proud of how you've taken care of Tyler, Richard said softly. Madison looked up at him with eyes too old for her 9 years. Do you really think we can stay here? Or will you get tired of us too? The question pierced Richard's heart. These children had been abandoned by every adult who was supposed to protect them. Why should they trust him? I'm not going anywhere, Madison, and neither are you. 3 days of peaceful routine shattered when Derek Morrison arrived at Richard's mansion like a vengeful storm. Richard was reviewing architectural plans for a new pediatric wing when Mrs. Anderson burst into his study, her usual composure cracked. Sir, there's a man at the front gate, she said, voice tight with concern. Claims to be the children's guardian. He has documents. Through his study window, Richard watched a disheveled man in his 30s pacing aggressively outside the gates, shouting at the security cameras. Even from a distance, Derek radiated menace. Where are Madison and Tyler? Richard asked. Playing in the garden with their new tutor, Mrs. Anderson replied. Should I bring them inside? Quietly. Don't alarm them, but keep them away from the windows. Richard met Derek at the front door, immediately understanding why the children lived in constant fear. Derek's eyes held a cold calculation that made Richard's skin crawl. Well, Derek sneered, looking Richard up and down. The famous Richard Wellington. Playing saint with my kids, are we? They're not your children, Richard replied evenly. And they're not going back to you. Derek laughed harshly, pulling out a folder of legal documents. See, that's where you're wrong, rich boy. I'm their legal guardian, court-appointed after their mama died. That makes you a kidnapper. Richard examined the papers. They appeared legitimate, though hastily prepared. Derek had covered his legal bases, at least superficially. These children show clear signs of abuse and neglect, Richard stated coldly. No court will return them to that environment. Prove it, Derek challenged, his smile vicious. Kids get bruises, kids get sick. Accidents happen when you're poor and struggling to survive. But I've been their guardian for 2 years, and some bleeding heart billionaire doesn't get to swoop in and play hero. From somewhere inside the house came the sound of Tyler's frightened crying. He'd spotted Derek through a window. Please, Derek heard Madison's panicked voice. He found us, we have to run. Derek's grin widened. Hear that? They know who they belong to. Now here's how this works, Wellington. You give me my kids back, plus let's say $2 million for the emotional distress you've caused me by keeping them from their loving guardian. You're out of your mind, Richard said flatly. Derek stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Those kids are my only source of income, and I've got bills to pay. Madison can pull in $50 a day begging, more if she looks sick enough. Tyler's good for 30 on a bad day. You think I'm giving up my gold mine to some rich bastard who'll get bored and dump them in foster care within a month? Richard felt rage building in his chest like molten steel. Get off my property. Derek backed away, but his expression promised. This was far from over. You don't know who you're messing with, Wellington. I survived the streets when my old man threw me out at 15. I learned how to fight dirty, how to make people pay. Those kids are mine legally, and I'm going to get them back one way or another. He pointed toward the house where Madison's terrified face pressed against a window. And when I do, they'll remember what happens to little rats who run away from home. The next morning, Richard's world exploded into chaos. His phone buzzed incessantly with calls from reporters, business associates, and board members. Derek had contacted every major news outlet in Chicago with a carefully crafted story. Billionaire kidnaps. Poor children, screamed the headline on the Chicago Tribune website, featuring a photo of Derek looking appropriately devastated outside Richard's mansion. He just swooped in and stole my babies, Derek told Channel 7 News, crocodile tears streaming down his face. I've raised Madison and Tyler since their mother died. We may be poor, but we're family. This rich man thinks he can buy anything, even other people's children. By afternoon, protesters had gathered outside Wellington Medical Center. Richard's assistant, Miranda, fielded dozens of calls from board members demanding explanations. The Chicago Children's Fund Gala is tonight, Miranda reminded him nervously. The mayor will be there along with every major donor in the city. Perhaps you should consider. I'm not hiding, Richard cut her off, and I'm certainly not abandoning Madison and Tyler. That evening, Richard walked into the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel knowing every eye would be on him. The whispers followed him through the crowd like a toxic cloud. There he is, someone muttered. The child snatcher. Midlife crisis, another voice suggested, playing daddy to boost his image. Chicago's elite circled like vultures, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright condemnation. Richard had spent 20 years building relationships with these people, and he watched them dissolve in real time. Mayor Patricia Reynolds intercepted him near the bar. Richard, we need to talk. This situation with the children is none of your concern. Richard replied politely but firmly. It becomes my concern when it affects city business, she shot back. The hospital board is reconsidering the South Side expansion project. Your reputation is becoming a liability. Across the room, Richard spotted Derek entering with a cheapy suit and predatory smile. Somehow he'd talked his way into the exclusive event, probably through media connections. Derek made a beeline for Richard, speaking loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Mr. Wellington, how nice to see you're enjoying yourself while my children suffer in isolation. I hope you're proud of yourself." The room fell silent, all conversations stopping to watch the confrontation. "Madison and Tyler are safe and happy," Richard replied calmly, "which is more than they ever were with you." Derek's voice cracked with manufactured emotion. "Happy? They're prisoners in your mansion. Madison cries herself to sleep every night, begging to come home to her loving guardian." Richard felt his composure slipping. Derek's lies were so outrageous, yet the crowd seemed to be buying his performance. That's when Richard's phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Anderson. "Tyler having panic attack. Saw Derek on TV. Please come home." Richard didn't hesitate. He turned away from Derek, from the gala, from the most important social event of the year. "Running away?" Derek called after him mockingly. "That's what guilty men do." As Richard pushed through the crowd toward the exit, he heard the whispers intensify. But for the first time in his life, he didn't care what Chicago's elite thought of him. He had children at home who needed him. Richard's world felt increasingly unstable as Vincent's presence became omnipresent. During a particularly stressful board meeting, Vincent dropped a bombshell. "I've been conducting my own investigation," Vincent announced, sliding a folder across the conference table. "There are disturbing inconsistencies in this Sophia situation." Richard's blood chilled as he opened the folder. Inside were photographs of Rose with another man, someone who looked remarkably similar to Richard. "This man was seen with Rose and Sophia regularly," Vincent continued smoothly. "DNA technology isn't infallible, Richard. Perhaps Sophia resembles your daughters for a different reason entirely." The board members exchanged uncomfortable glances as Vincent pressed on. "I've spoken with the orphanage administrator. They have no record of Sophia ever being there. Rose's story doesn't check out." Richard stared at the photographs, doubt creeping into his mind like poison. "This proves nothing, doesn't it? A mentally unstable homeless woman creates an elaborate fantasy about a lost child. A traumatized little girl adopts that story as her own reality. You, grieving your wife, desperately want to believe it." That night, Richard found himself studying Sophia as she played with Emma and Chloe. Their similarities were undeniable, but Vincent's words echoed relentlessly. What if he'd been manipulated? What if Rose had coached Sophia to approach him? Dr. Sarah noticed his withdrawal immediately. "You're questioning the DNA results," she observed during their session. "Vincent showed me evidence that Rose might have fabricated her story. What if Sophia isn't really my daughter? Richard, think about what you're saying. Would that change how you feel about her?" But the damage was done. Richard found himself pulling back, analyzing Sophia's every gesture for signs of deception. When she called him daddy, he wondered if it was genuine or learned behavior. Sophia sensed the change immediately. Her nightmares returned with vicious intensity. "He's coming back," she sobbed one night. "The silver-haired man. He told Rose he would take me away if she didn't stop lying." "What lies?" Richard asked, his voice sharper than intended. Sophia recoiled as if struck. I don't know. Rose said we had to keep secrets to stay safe." Vincent's final blow came via text message late that night. "The DNA lab that processed Sophia's test has been investigated for falsifying results. Perhaps we should run a second test at a different facility?" Richard stared at his phone, everything he believed crumbling around him. Richard's phone rang at 6 a.m., an unknown number, but something compelled him to answer. "Mr. Sterling, this is Dr. Patricia Wells from Mercy Hospital. I worked with Rose Martinez years ago. I saw the news about Sophia, and I need to tell you the truth." Richard's heart pounded as he stepped onto his balcony, away from the sleeping girls. "Rose wasn't lying," Dr. Wells continued, her voice shaking. "I was there the night your triplets were born. Vincent Sterling paid the hospital administrator $50,000 to falsify records and remove one baby from the system. What? Richard whispered. Rose tried to stop it, but Vincent threatened her job, her pension, everything. When she took Sophia to protect her, Vincent spread rumors that she'd had a mental breakdown. I kept quiet because I was scared, but I can't anymore. That little girl belongs with you. Dr. Wells agreed to meet at a coffee shop an hour later. She brought documents, original delivery records, payment receipts, and most damning of all, a recording she'd made of Vincent's conversation with the administrator. Document everything. Vincent's voice crackled through the old device. 3. Babies become 2. If anyone asked questions, Rose Martinez had psychological issues. She's unreliable. Richard's hands shook with rage as the truth crystallized. The photographs Vincent had shown the board were doctored. The DNA lab investigation was fabricated. Even the man in the photos with Rose was digitally manipulated to look like Richard. Why? Richard asked Dr. Wells. From what I overheard, Vincent was concerned about inheritance issues. 3 children meant his influence over your estate would be diminished. He wanted control. Richard raced home to find Vincent in his kitchen, calmly drinking coffee while watching the girls eat breakfast. Good morning, Richard. You look terrible. Perhaps the stress is getting to you. I know what you did, Richard said quietly, his voice deadly calm. Vincent's expression didn't change. I've done many things. You'll need to be more specific. Richard played the recording. Vincent's face barely flickered, but Sophia looked up from her cereal, recognition dawning in her eyes. That's the voice, she whispered, dropping her spoon. The man who scared Rose. Emma and Chloe moved protectively toward their sister as Vincent stood slowly. Proof of nothing, Vincent said smoothly. Ancient recordings can be manipulated easily. But his mask was slipping, and they all saw it. Get out, Richard said. Now. I built this family's empire while you played with toys, Vincent snarled. Sophia doesn't belong here. Yes, she does, Emma declared fiercely. She's our sister, Chloe added. Vincent's cold gaze swept over the 3 identical girls. This isn't over. 2 days after the confrontation, Richard thought the worst was behind them. Vincent had disappeared, his threats seeming like the desperate words of a defeated man. He was wrong. The call came while Richard was in a crucial board meeting, finally addressing Vincent's manipulations with company leadership. Mr. Sterling. Principal Morrison's voice was tight with panic. There's been an incident. The girls, they're gone. Richard's blood turned to ice. What do you mean, gone? The field trip to the Science Museum. 3 men with official-looking credentials claimed there was a family emergency. They took Emma, Chloe, and Sophia. By the time we verified with your office, they'd vanished. Richard's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Riverside, Warehouse Dock 7. Come alone or the girls disappear forever. You have 1 hour. Another message followed. Bring signed documents transferring 30% of Sterling Enterprises to Vincent Sterling. No police, no FBI, no tricks. Racing through traffic, Richard's mind spun with terror and rage. Vincent had planned this meticulously, waiting for the perfect moment when the girls would be away from their bodyguards on a school trip. At the warehouse, Vincent stood in the shadows between towering shipping containers. Behind him, 3 men with dead eyes waited beside a black van. Where are my daughters? Richard demanded. Safe for now. Dock 7 has excellent soundproofing. No one will hear them if things go badly. Vincent pulled out a tablet showing grainy footage of 3 small figures huddled together in what looked like a storage room. 30% ownership, Richard. That's all I've ever asked for, what I deserve after building this empire. This isn't about the company, Richard realized. You're sick. You stole my daughter, destroyed a woman's life, traumatized children. I protected the family legacy. Vincent exploded. Your father chose you over me despite everything I sacrificed. 3 children would have complicated inheritance even further. Richard saw the madness clearly now. Years of resentment had twisted Vincent into something monstrous. "The contracts," Vincent demanded, extending his hand. Richard pulled out the documents his lawyers had quickly prepared. "Let me see them first. Let me know they're alive." Vincent's smile was cold. "Oh, Richard, did you really think I'd let you all live after this? Too many loose ends?" Inside the cold storage room, Emma, Chloe, and Sophia huddled together on the concrete floor. The metal door had slammed shut hours ago, leaving them in near darkness with only a small ventilation grate providing dim light. "I'm scared," Chloe whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Me too," Emma admitted, but she squeezed Sophia's hand. "Sophia, you lived on the streets. Do you know how to get out of places like this?" Sophia's eyes adjusted to the darkness as memories of grandmother. Rose's survival lessons flooded back. "Rose taught me things," she said quietly. "She said bad men sometimes take children and we had to be smart." She stood up, examining their prison methodically. The walls were solid concrete, but the ventilation grate caught her attention. It was larger than it appeared from below, and Rose had once shown her how to check if vents connected to other rooms. "Help me up," Sophia instructed. Emma and Chloe formed a human ladder, lifting their sister toward the grate. Sophia's small fingers worked at the screws. "Rose always carried a bobby pin for emergencies," she murmured, using her own hair clip to loosen the grate. "What do you see?" Emma asked anxiously. "The vent goes to another room. I can hear voices on them and water dripping. We're near the docks, just like the silver-haired man said." Sophia's street instincts kicked in. "There's an old trick Rose showed me. If we're in danger, make noise where people might hear." Sophia pulled out the small whistle Rose had given her, hidden in the locket Richard had placed around her neck. 3 sharp blasts echoed through the ventilation system. "That's a distress signal," Sophia explained. "Rose said whistles carry farther than voices." Meanwhile, Sophia began working on something else Rose had taught her: how to leave messages. Using a sharp piece of concrete, she scratched letters into the metal vent cover. "Doc 7 help us. ES." Emma and Chloe watched in amazement as their sister demonstrated survival skills they'd never imagined. "There's something else," Sophia said, pulling them back into a huddle. "Rose taught me that bad men always have patterns. They check on prisoners. At regular times, we need to be ready when that door opens." "Ready for what?" Chloe asked. Sophia's eyes gleamed with determination that reminded them both of their father. "Ready to run." Richard stared at the contracts in his hands, Vincent's ultimatum echoing in the warehouse air. 30% of Sterling Enterprises. Everything his father had built for his daughters' lives. "You have 5 minutes to decide," Vincent said coldly, checking his expensive watch. "Sign those papers or the girls disappear forever." Richard's mind raced. The FBI was already tracking his phone, but Vincent had chosen this location perfectly, an abandoned section of the docks where response time would be too slow. Even if help arrived, Vincent's men could vanish with the girls before anyone reached them. "The company means nothing without them," Richard said quietly, reaching for a pen. Vincent's eyes gleamed with triumph. "Finally, you understand what matters." But as Richard prepared to sign, his phone buzzed with an incoming text. Hidden from Vincent's view, he glanced down and saw a message that made his heart leap. "Dad, Sophia found way out. Dock 7, vent system. We're trying to escape. E&C." Emma had somehow gotten hold of a phone. The girls were alive and fighting back. Richard looked up at Vincent, his uncle's smug expression unchanged. Vincent had no idea his perfect plan was unraveling. "You know." "What, Uncle?" Richard said, slowly lowering the pen. "You're right about what matters, but you never understood what that was." Vincent's face darkened. "Sign the papers, Richard. You spent years manipulating me, stealing my daughter, destroying lives, all for money and power. But you missed the most important thing." Richard's voice grew stronger. Family isn't about blood or inheritance, it's about love, sacrifice, protection. Touching philosophy, Vincent sneered. Sign the contracts or your daughters die. My daughters are stronger than you think, Richard replied, his phone buzzing with another message. Almost out. Sophia remembers Rose's lessons. Richard smiled, infuriating Vincent further. You underestimated them just like you underestimated me. They're not victims, they're fighters. Vincent lunged forward, grabbing Richard's shirt. You're bluffing. Call your men, Richard challenged. Check. On the girls. Vincent's confidence wavered as he barked orders into his radio. Static answered, then panicked voices. Boss, they're gone. The room is empty. Richard's smile widened. Game over, Vincent. Vincent's face contorted with rage as his carefully orchestrated plan crumbled. Find them, he screamed into his radio. They're just children. But Richard could hear the panic in his uncle's voice. The man who had controlled every situation for decades was finally losing control. It's over, Vincent, Richard said, pulling out his phone to call the police. Vincent grabbed Richard's wrist with surprising strength. You think this is over? You have no idea what I'm capable of. I know you separated Sophia from her sisters. I know you paid hospital officials. I know you threatened Rose. I did more than threaten her, Vincent snarled, his mask finally slipping completely. Rose Martinez was going to expose everything. She had to be stopped. Richard's blood froze. What are you saying? The old woman's death wasn't natural, Vincent continued, rage making him reckless. She was planning to contact you directly. To bring Sophia to your office, I couldn't allow that. Horror washed over Richard as the full scope of Vincent's evil became clear. You killed her. I eliminated a problem, Vincent corrected coldly. Just like I eliminated problems before. Before? Richard whispered, though he already knew. Your precious Sarah. Did you really think her fatal complications during childbirth were random? The stress medication I convinced her doctor to prescribe during pregnancy, medication that interfered with her blood pressure. Richard staggered backward. You murdered my wife. I protected the family legacy. Sarah was getting suspicious about the missing third baby. She kept asking questions about discrepancies in her medical records. I had to act. Vincent pulled out a gun, his desperation evident. You forced my hand, Richard. I spent 20 years positioning myself as your heir. 3 children complicated everything, so I removed one. When Sarah threatened to expose the truth, I removed her too. And now you'll remove me, Richard finished. And then what? Kill 3 innocent children? I'll raise them properly, teach them about real power, real legacy. They'll thank me when they're older. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Vincent's eyes darted toward the sound. Too late for the cavalry, nephew. By the time they arrive, you'll be dead, and the girls will be gone forever. But Richard smiled grimly. You made one mistake, Vincent. What? You confessed everything while my phone was recording. The FBI has heard every word. FBI agents surrounded the warehouse as Vincent's face went white with realization. His decades of careful manipulation had unraveled in minutes due to his own rage-fueled confessions. Drop the weapon, Agent Martinez shouted through a megaphone. Vincent spun wildly, gun still pointed at Richard. This isn't how it ends. I built everything. You destroyed everything, Richard countered, stepping closer despite the weapon. Sarah, Rose, Sophia's childhood, all sacrificed for your greed. Through the warehouse's broken windows, Richard spotted 3 small figures running toward the FBI perimeter. Emma, Chloe, and Sophia had escaped through the ventilation system, just as Sophia's street-smart instincts had planned. Daddy? Sophia's voice carried across the dock, filled with relief and love. Vincent's eyes followed Richard's gaze to the girls. His last leverage was gone, but desperation made him dangerous. If I can't have the company, nobody can, Vincent snarled, swinging the gun toward the approaching children. Richard didn't hesitate. Years of corporate negotiations had taught him to read people, and he saw the exact moment Vincent's finger moved toward the trigger. Richard lunged forward, tackling his uncle just as the gun fired harmlessly into the air. They crashed to the concrete together, Vincent's weapon skittering away. FBI agents swarmed the area, but the fight was already over. Vincent lay beneath Richard, his face a mask of defeat and fury. 20 years, Vincent gasped. 20 years I waited for what should have been mine. It was never yours, Richard said quietly, standing as agents cuffed his uncle. Dad built the company for family, not for power. You never understood the difference. Agent Martinez approached with Richard's phone. We recorded everything. Mr. Sterling, his confessions about the hospital bribes, Rose Martinez's death and your wife's murder. It's all admissible evidence. Vincent was loaded into a police van, his silver hair disheveled, his expensive suit torn. As the doors slammed shut, he looked through the window at Richard one last time. You think you've won? Vincent called out. You'll never escape what I've done to your family. But Richard wasn't listening. Emma, Chloe, and Sophia raced toward him, their identical faces streaked with tears and dirt but glowing with relief. He knelt as they crashed into his arms, holding all three daughters tightly. We did it, Daddy, Sophia whispered. Rose's lessons saved us. You saved yourselves, Richard said, his voice thick with emotion and pride. 1 year later, Richard stood in the backyard of their new home, a warm, welcoming house far from the cold marble mansion where secrets had festered. Laughter filled the air as Emma, Chloe, and Sophia chased their new golden retriever, Rosie, named in honor of the woman who had protected Sophia when no one else could. Higher, Daddy, Sophia called from the swing Richard had built himself, her blonde curls catching the afternoon sunlight. The nightmares were gone now, replaced by the confident joy of a child who knew she was loved unconditionally. Dr. Sarah Hamilton approached, carrying a birthday cake decorated with 8 candles. Hard to believe they're 8 today, she smiled, watching the triplets play together with the natural ease of sisters who had never truly been apart. Time flies when you're actually living it, Richard replied, no longer the workaholic CEO who had missed so many precious moments. He'd stepped back from daily operations at Sterling Enterprises, which now thrived under new leadership, while he focused on what truly mattered. Any regrets about giving up the corporate life? Sarah asked. Richard shook his head, watching Sophia teach her sisters a game Rose had shown her. I spent years chasing success I already had. These girls, they're my real legacy. The Jessica Parker Foundation, established in honor of Sophia's guardian angel, had grown beyond Richard's wildest hopes. Hundreds of lost children had been reunited with families, and Rose's story had inspired new protocols to prevent future separations. Vincent was serving 3 consecutive life sentences for murder, conspiracy, and kidnapping. Richard felt no satisfaction in his uncle's downfall, only sadness for the brilliant man who had chosen power over family. Daddy, come see, Emma called excitedly. The girls had found something in the garden, a time capsule they'd buried together 6 months ago. Inside were drawings they'd made of their perfect family, 3 little girls holding hands with their father and floating above them in the clouds, 2 angels, Sarah and Rose, watching over them all. Do you think they're proud of us? Sophia asked, touching the picture gently. I know they are, Richard said, pulling all 3 daughters close. Mom would be amazed by how brave and kind you all are. And Rose, she'd be so happy to see you home where you belong. As the sun set over their backyard, Richard reflected on the journey that had brought them here. A chance encounter at a gas station had shattered his carefully controlled world, revealing that the most important things in life couldn't be planned or purchased, only loved, protected, and cherished. Sophia looked up at him with those brilliant blue eyes that had changed everything. Thank you for finding me, Daddy. Thank you for letting me, Richard replied, his heart full beyond measure. The Sterling family was finally complete, not because of wealth or status, but because of love that had survived separation, manipulation, and betrayal. They had each other, and that was everything.